This video is sponsored by Brilliant. Dinosaurs and LEGO are both pretty cool on their own, but I thought it'd be even cooler if I added a mechanism to our build. So today, let's build up a fearsome dinosaur kinetic sculpture. Let's start things off with the head. Here, I'm thinking these Ninjago blade parts could be really nice if we attach them together at the right angle. To do that, I'll use this Technic connector and a pair of pneumatic T-parts. Then we can connect in the blades. With that together, I want to add in some contrasting blue for a dino mohawk. Let's build up some structure to connect this in. We can employ a burnt hot dog here to attach this bullrock eye. Next, I can connect a robot hand and an Among Us plate. To that, we can add a rounded plate and a rod. Back on the head, I'll add a half pin so that the two sub-assemblies can come together. Now we need to give our dino some teeth. For that, I think this Ninjago sword hilt would be perfect. To it, I'll add a pair of robot hands. Then on the head, I'll attach another angled connector. Let's connect the teeth and swing them into place. Now, we need to build up some eyes for our prehistoric murder bird. I'll use a hollow stud and a 2-long bar for that. Then, let's add a bushing and a rod end. The eyes can connect into this robot hand. To make him a bit more angry, let's incorporate some eyebrows in the form of rod ends and spikes. We can do something similar for underneath the eyes, again using a spike and a rod end, before adding a skelly arm and a small spike. This can connect in and swing into place. I'll mirror that over to the other side, and we can start to think about improving our dino's luscious mane. To attach more spikes at the right angle, I'll connect in a cone, and then use an unburnt hot dog. Back on the head, we can attach in a rod and a rounded plate to connect the dog. One more spike can clip in using a small Technic beam. I'm starting to think that our dino has a bit of a frilled lizard look going on. So why not lean into it and add some more frills in the form of this bullrock shield. I'll cap it off with a pseudo eye, and then construct an absolute mess of bars and clips to get it attached at the right angle. Let's add one last frill by using a rounded plate and a 45-degree bar. After locking things together and giving myself a spot for the lower jaw, we can connect in the frills. Let's use this dark red fur bit for the lower jaw. I want to add in some teeth here as well. Let's build up some structure with this suspiciously shaped new part. I'll add a number of robot hands to it, or at least try to. Let's clip that structure in and then add some more robot hands to the teeth. Then we can snap them in. After, to cover up for the fact that we have no front teeth, I'm going to clip in a tongue using a rod end and a large spike. With the lower jaw done, let's attach the two head halves together. One final touch is to add in a socket for the neck. Let's slip that in to complete the head. Now, let's dive into the mechanism that will make this dino run, starting with this support. We'll construct it with a number of Technic beams and pins. Now, let's use these pin beams to attach some Technic bricks. Because we need both legs to move freely, I think I want the crank mechanism to be centered. In order to change the direction of rotation, we can use these beveled gears. I'll connect a stopper axle and then a bushing before adding it to this gearbox part. Perpendicular to that, I'll attach in another bevel gear so we can change the axes of rotation. I want this to be powered by a LEGO motor, but since they spin at fairly high RPMs, I need to use a step-down gear ratio, which will decrease the speed and increase the torque. We can achieve that with a large gear on the output shaft and a smaller gear on the input shaft. Then I'll use another gearbox to securely attach our motor. Let's connect that up to a battery box and see how it works. While we build this, I don't really want the motor to be attached, so let's temporarily remove the motor and add in a crank. To our base, let's add a few connectors to facilitate attaching our gear assembly. The next thing we can build up is the Dino body. We can begin by stacking up a number of Technic bricks. Then, let's add some pins and a number of Technic beams. I'm using a stopper axle here, since I couldn't really figure out a more clever way to attach these beams together. Now, I'll connect that into the stand. In order to get our body to move, we need a third and fourth bar in this 4-bar linkage. For one of the bars, let's stack together some beams. This third bar can connect in. A 4-bar linkage is a great way to turn rotary movement, like that from the output of our gearbox, into linear movement. For the fourth bar, which will attach the output of our gearbox to the other beam, we can use some small lift arms. Let's attach that together to get the starting movement of our motorized Dino. Now for the legs, I'll construct another linkage with some Technic beams and pins. I've been using the lower friction pins here, which will let the mechanism move more freely. For the input here, I'll use some cams and then connect the leg into the assembly and attach the cams to the output shaft. We're starting to get there with a running Dino motion. Next, I want to add a neck that bobs back and forth. Here, once again, the solution is some Technic beams and pins. Since there's no such thing as a 6-unit long beam, I've doubled up some of these half beams. Let's attach that in, and after adding the leg to the other side, we can try things out with the motor. With the mechanism now sorted, we can turn our attention to building up some tiny T-Rex arms, like our Dino's just gotten home from Arms Day. For his tiny Dino hands, I want to use some minifigure binoculars and spikes. Then an Among Us plate can join the fray, and we can clip a robot hand into that. The lower arms will consist of a hollow stud and a rod end. The elbow joint will be another rod end and a bar. Then, for the upper arms, I'll begin with a robot hand, which we can attach some Technic connectors and a bullrock eye to. Now, we can bring these two halves together. Finally, for the shoulder connection, I want to use these low-friction pin axles that LEGO recently released in gunmetal, which is a super interesting color to have this part in. Anyway, let's clip that in and cap it off with a flipper. That pin should ensure that this flops around nicely while our Dino runs. With the arms completed, I want to turn our attention to the legs. We already have a skeleton that we need to adhere to, so this will be a bit more challenging than what I usually do. But let's start off by building up the foot. For the claws, I have this beam, which I'll add some pin axles to, and then we can connect in some ratcheting joints for our theropod. Let's cap it off with some claws. Another pin axle can connect into the claws and attach them to the existing lift arm. Let's further detail the foot by adding a few pins so that we can connect in this Hero Factory shell. Next, let's work on the lower leg. This Ben 10 part should work nicely, but I don't have a way to attach it to this beam. So instead, let's add an axle and a rod as a way to attach these connectors. With them installed, the dimensions match our old Technic beam perfectly. Next up, we can attach a robot hand, hold this large spike, and cover up these connectors. Then let's clip in the foot. Now let's move on to the upper legs. For some dark red details on the underside of the legs, let's clip in this wing part. Next, I'd like to use this red Bionicle blade. To attach it, let's use an L-shaped Technic beam and a red axle. I have this armor plate from a Star Wars buildable figure that I think would be perfect here. To attach it, let's use a shell And then a ball on a beam part can allow for a pin to connect things at the right angle. To further build up the legs, we can use an old school Technic panel, which I'll add a dino tail to. Then we can attach a large spike part. On the other side, I'll add a connector for an attachment point. Then, to give a bit more size to this, we can add in some more connectors, which I'll cap off with a pair of pin axles. We can go ahead and connect 2 more of those Ninjago blades here. Let's clip this assembly in. And then it's time to remove this Technic beam and assemble the leg. With the leg completed, we can move on to armoring up the body. I'll start by constructing a neck connection using another of these fancy beams. To it, I'll add a rounded plate and a connector. For the neck connection itself, let's add in an axle to hold a ball joint. I'll attach this into the body with another rounded plate to lock it together. Next, I want to add a bunch of these wings to the underbelly for some dino plumage. To do that, let's add in some connectors, and then connect a wing. Another wing I'll connect to this beam, so that it can attach between our 2 body connectors. That first wing can lock it in. For more red underbelly, we can employ this Visorak foot. On the underside, let's attach a connector and some axles. To the Technic brick here, let's attach a large slope, and then 1 more wing for good measure. For the next detail, I'm going to connect together a bunch of blue tubes with pins, since I don't actually have the right tubes for the job. With the tube of tubes done, let's attach that into an old Technic panel. To connect the panel in, let's add a few connectors, which can hold some 3 long pins. On the tube end, I'll add another pin. Let's attach that into the body, and then make sure the function still works. Oops, looks like the tube's disconnected. Let's fix that by replacing the pin with a half pin and a rod, which should be able to slide freely through the Technic connector as needed. Let's see if that's helped. That's really shaping up. Now we need to add some more blue to the back of our dino's neck. This connector can allow for a rounded plate to connect in. Then, the rounded plates can attach into the existing structure. Next, I want to use one of these newer Technic panels to fill in the torso. I think that these panel type parts have been really good at covering up the mechanical skeleton I have hiding underneath here. Let's connect that in, and then we can layer on another larger panel. Look at that, I have an Exoforce sticker hiding here. We can connect in one of these blade parts to cap off the top side. Then, I'll add a pin connector so that we can lock this into the body. Let's make sure this doesn't interfere with any of the movement. Sweet. Next up, let's build a spine on this flex tube using a bunch of Hero Factory shells. I've included some connection points to use. For this first one, I'll extend it with a connector, and then we can add in some pins. Let's do some minor surgery and connect it in. To round out the torso, let's build up one more panel-based assembly. I'll use some connectors and lift arms in an effort to give us some more spots to connect 2 more panels. Let's clip that in, and then we can move on to figuring out the structure to support this tail. Here, I'll make a snake using some of these old Bionicle socket parts. To continue the blue stripe we started earlier, I'll connect some more of these tubes together. Next, let's detail the panel parts so that we can slide the tube through here. Let's go ahead and add in a second panel. For the end of the tail, I'll use a larger version of the panel part. And to cap off the tail, I'll add a half pin and a feather part. Let's connect that into the socket snake, and then we can attach it into the body. Now, for the final assembly, let's replace these leg skeletons with the real deal. Then we can clip the head into place. Next, let's add in the arms. Finally, we can replace the crank with the motor. With this build, there was a lot to figure out and design for myself. I learn best by doing. That's part of why I love building so much. Brilliant, the sponsor of today's video, makes it easy to learn by doing too. They have thousands of interactive lessons in math, data analysis, programming, and AI. Learning by doing is at Brilliant's core, and I've found it really effective at building up my problem-solving skills. You can tell with each lesson that their focus is on helping you to actually understand problems from a first principles approach, rather than simply memorizing facts. At the end of the day, this approach makes you a much better thinker while building your knowledge at the same time. Brilliant structures lessons into bite-sized pieces so that you can learn a little every day. This is a powerful habit to form that compounds over time. You'll be shocked at how much you can learn in a year. Brilliant has a consistently growing number of courses in programming, which is a great way to build foundational skills for solving the problems of today and tomorrow. For instance, you can get familiar with Python and start building programs on day one with a built-in drag-and-drop editor. You can learn essential coding elements from loops and variables to nesting and conditionals. Develop your mind to think like a programmer and begin writing complex programs to build games and apps. To try everything Brilliant has to offer for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/mitch.builds or scan the QR code on screen. Or you can click the link in the description. You'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription. Thanks, Brilliant. Now it's time for the beauty shots. Thanks to all the amazing people supporting me over on Patreon. You are the building blocks that make this channel possible. And special shout out to my newest patrons, Kai Cowley and Rotato. If you like this video, YouTube thinks you'll enjoy this one too. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. But until then, happy building.